Tethered to the Eclipse, a Blackwood Ridge mystery. The rain in Blackwood Ridge didn't wash things clean. It only drove the secrets deeper into the mud. Elias Thorne, an investigator for the Department of Mythological Anomalies, knelt in the wet soil of the pine forest. Before him lay the third victim. The man's chest was laid open, but there was no blood. Instead, the wound was packed with crushed nightshade and inscribed with a jagged, ancient rune. "You're looking at it wrong, Inspector," a deep, gravelly voice murmured from the fog. Elias didn't flinch. He slowly stood and turned. Stepping from the mist was Kalen Vance, the town's game warden. Kalen was a mountain of a man, clad in a waxed canvas jacket, his dark hair plastered to his forehead by the rain. But it was his eyes that always caught Elias off guard. They were a striking, unnatural amber, catching the dim light like a predator's. "And how should I be looking at it, Mr. Vance?" Elias asked, wiping mud from his gloves. "Like it's a warning," Kalen said, stepping closer. The scent of him crushed pine needles, ozone, and something distinctly wild made Elias's breath hitch. Not a crime scene. The rune isn't a signature. It's a lock, and someone is picking it. Before Elias could ask what he meant, a low, unnatural growl vibrated through the trees. The fog seemed to thicken, turning a sickly, bruised purple. The shadows between the pines detached themselves, forming into lupine shapes with eyes like burning coals. Shadow hounds. "Get behind me!" Kalen ordered, his voice dropping an octave, resonating in Elias's chest. "Kalen, there are too many. I said behind me." What happened next defied the rational mind Elias had built his career upon. Kalen didn't draw a weapon. He dropped to his knees, a guttural roar tearing from his throat. The sound of snapping bone and tearing fabric filled the air. Kalen's body expanded, his spine arching violently as dark fur erupted through his skin. Within seconds, the game warden was gone. In his place stood a mythic beast, an 8-foot-tall werewolf, but not the mindless monster of fairy tales. This creature was primordial, its fur the color of a starless night, its eyes burning with celestial silver light. The Lupus Day, the Hound of the Moon. Elias had read about them in the Forbidden Archives, thought them merely allegories for ancient tribal guardians. The mythic wolf lunged. It moved like liquid shadow, tearing through the shadow hounds with brutal, divine efficiency. Silver light flared from its claws, dissolving the dark creatures into ash. When the last hound perished, the massive wolf turned to Elias. It panted, its massive chest heaving, and slowly, the terrifying beast lowered its head, nudging Elias's hand with a wet, cold nose. Elias trembled, reaching out to touch the coarse dark fur. "Kalen?" he whispered. The wolf let out a soft whine, then stepped back into the shadows. By the time the moon broke through the clouds, the beast was gone, and Kalen lay naked and shivering in the ferns. Elias took him back to his cabin at the edge of town. The thriller aspect of Elias's investigation had suddenly become a fight for survival. The shadow hounds weren't random. They were summoned. Someone in Blackwood Ridge was trying to break the ancient seals that kept the void of primordial darkness from the old myths from bleeding into the world, and Kalen, as the current vessel of the moon's hound, was the only thing standing in the way. In the warm glow of the cabin's fireplace, Elias gently pressed a warm, damp cloth to a gash on Kalen's shoulder. Kalen hissed, his amber eyes tracking Elias's every movement. "You were bleeding," Elias murmured, his voice soft. "It will heal," Kalen rasped. He reached out, his large, calloused hand gently catching Elias's wrist. The touch sent a jolt of heat straight to Elias's core. "You should have run, Elias, when you saw what I am." "I am an investigator of the anomalies," Elias replied, meeting his gaze. "I don't run from them. And I don't run from you." Kalen's thumb stroked the inside of Elias's wrist, right over his pulse. The myth of the Lupus Day stated that the wolf was bound to the moon, but it also spoke of an anchor, a mortal soul whose heartbeat kept the wolf from losing its humanity to the beast. Looking into Kalen's eyes, Elias felt the heavy, terrifying pull of that ancient tether. It wasn't just magic. It was a profound, soul-deep yearning. Silas, Kalen said suddenly, his voice tight. The town elder. I smelled nightshade and brimstone on the wind tonight. He's the one opening the seals. Elias's mind raced, connecting the clues. The murders. The victims weren't random. They were the descendants of the original priests who helped bind the void. Silas is killing them to undo the blood seal. And tonight is the lunar eclipse, Kalen added, his eyes darkening. When the moon is swallowed, my power will be at its weakest. He'll use the eclipse to open the final gate beneath the old church. Then we stop him, Elias said, leaning in. The distance between them vanished. Kalen's gaze dropped to Elias's lips, his breathing growing heavy. Elias, Kalen warned, a low rumble vibrating in his chest. If we do this, if I claim you as my anchor, there is no going back. The bond will tie your soul to the beast. If I fall to the void, it will take you with me. I've spent my whole life reading about myths in dusty books, Elias whispered, his hand coming up to cup Kalen's jaw, his thumb brushing over a faint scar. I want to live in one. With you. Kalen let out a ragged breath and closed the distance. The kiss was desperate, tasting of rain, copper, and ancient longing. It was a collision of two worlds. Kalen's arms wrapped around Elias, pulling him flush against his chest, lifting him effortlessly. Elias tangled his hands in Kalen's dark hair, anchoring him, grounding him. In that embrace, Elias felt the thrum of the mythic magic settling into his bones, a silver thread wrapping around his heart. The crypt beneath the Blackwood church was suffocating, smelling of centuries of decay and fresh blood. Elias and Kalen descended the stone stairs, the air growing freezing cold. At the center of the cavernous room, Elder Silas stood before a massive stone altar. The altar was cracked, leaking a thick, black mist that writhed like living snakes. Above them, through a grated window, the moon was being swallowed by the earth's shadow. The eclipse had begun. You're too late, Hound, Silas cackled, his eyes entirely black. He held a jagged obsidian dagger. The void hungers. The seals are broken. The black mist surged, coalescing into a massive, grotesque entity, a shadow of the eclipse, a creature of pure, anti-mythic malice. It roared, a sound that made Elias's ears bleed, and lunged. Kalen didn't hesitate. He shifted mid-stride. The transformation was faster this time, fueled by the adrenaline and the newly forged bond between him and Elias. The mythic wolf hit the shadow like a freight train. The cavern erupted into chaos. Claws of silver light clashed against tendrils of absolute darkness. Kalen was powerful, but the eclipse was sapping his strength. The shadow whipped a tendril of dark magic, striking Kalen and sending the massive wolf crashing into the stone wall. Kalen whimpered, the silver in his eyes flickering. The beast was losing. The void was creeping into his fur, turning it gray. He needs his anchor, Elias realized. Ignoring the freezing, oppressive magic in the air, Elias sprinted toward the altar. Silas turned, raising the obsidian dagger. Foolish human. Elias didn't have a weapon, but he had the lore. He grabbed the heavy silver censer hanging from the altar's chain, swinging it with all his might. It connected with Silas's wrist, shattering the bone. The dagger clattered to the floor. Elias kicked it away and grabbed the ancient, runic texts scattered on the altar. Kalen, Elias screamed over the roar of the shadow. He began to chant the binding words of the moon goddess, the counter-ritual he had memorized from the archives. His voice echoed with a strange, dual resonance, amplified by the soul tie. Hearing Elias's voice, Kalen's head snapped up. The silver in his eyes flared blindingly bright. The mythic wolf drew upon the strength of his anchor. He rose, shaking off the dark mist, and let out a howl that shook the very foundations of the earth. It was a sound of pure, celestial defiance. Empowered by the chant and his bond to Elias, Kalen leaped. He sank his glowing claws into the chest of the shadow entity. With a final, agonizing shriek, the creature of the void exploded into a shower of harmless, dissipating ash. Silas, stripped of his dark magic, collapsed to his knees, weeping as the town's constables, drawn by the noise, rushed down the stairs to arrest him. Dawn broke over Blackwood Ridge, painting the sky in strokes of bruised purple and gold. Elias sat on the tailgate of Kalen's truck, a thermos of coffee in his hands. The cabin was quiet. The door opened, and Kalen stepped out. He was human again, wearing a fresh flannel shirt, though he moved with a lingering, predatory grace. He walked over, taking the thermos from Elias and setting it aside. Without a word, Kalen pulled Elias into his arms, burying his face in the crook of Elias's neck. He smelled of soap in the crisp morning air, but beneath it, Elias could still smell the wild, intoxicating scent of the wolf. "You saved me," Kalen murmured against his skin, pressing a soft kiss to Elias's pulse point. "We saved each other," Elias corrected, wrapping his arms around Kalen's broad shoulders, holding him tight. The mystery of Blackwood Ridge was solved, the thriller of the eclipse over. But as Elias looked into Kalen's amber eyes, now soft and filled with a profound, quiet devotion, he knew their story was just beginning. They were bound by myth, tethered by moonlight, and anchored by a love that defied the dark. And for the first time in his life, Elias Thorne wasn't just investigating the myths. He was living in the heart of one.